Hello. Welcome to today's session of Selling the Couch. I hope you're doing well, having an incredible day. So, if you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while, but you're keenly aware that you have a successful and busy private practice, you may be struggling with how in the world am I going to manage starting a podcast on top of all of the other things that I'm doing. Next year for me will be my 10th year as a podcaster. We've released over 375 episodes of the STC podcast, and I've learned a ton of things along the way. And today we're diving into 5 unique ways that you can launch and run a successful podcast without it feeling like another thing or another job that you have to factor in. You know, running a private practice is demanding. There's the clinical side, the admin side, the marketing side of it, and just like the emotional toll that running a private practice and seeing clients takes on us as therapists. And, you know, I'm like keenly aware that the last thing that any of us want to do is like add another task unless there's like a disproportionate ROI to that task. But what if I told you that in a weird way, podcasting has actually made my life a lot easier? If someone had told me this, I would have been like, listen, I'm like, check it out of this episode. I am not listening to this because I do not believe this at all. But back in 2015, when I launched STC, I was doing 5.5 days of clinical work. So I was doing some therapy, working with individuals and couples. And then I was also doing biopsychosocial evaluations and then bariatric surgery psych evals. It took up a lot of time. And I remember in those early days, I would just be like, how in the world, I knew that I wanted to start a podcast, but how in the world am I going to balance all of this? And in today's episode, we just really wanted to share 5 unexpected insights that will not only show you how to start a podcast efficiently, but also how it can be a benefit to your business and just to your personal life as well. So the 5 points that we're going to cover, I'll just share them here at the top just so that you can start to, get a framework on things. So point 1 is batch record and automate. Point 2 is repurpose your existing content. Point 3 is see podcasting as a client attraction tool. Point 4 is keep episodes short and impactful. And then 5 is outsource editing to free up time. So point 1 is all about batch record and automate to save time. Now, why is this important? We are all keenly aware, especially I think in this post-pandemic world, of how precious time is. Time really is our most precious asset. It's the thing that we can't get back. Time is even more prized when you're already busy and running a successful business or a successful practice. Most think that podcasting requires weekly sessions, but the truth is you can actually batch record a bunch of podcast episodes in one sitting. So imagine something like this. You set aside a block of time, like a 2 to 3 hour block of time every 2 months, and you record 6 to 8 episodes during that time. That's enough content for 2 months of weekly episodes without interrupting your day-to-day schedule. I personally, I did this in the early days of STC, and that's how I was able to kind of release a lot of episodes. But personally for me now is I just block off Tuesday mornings for 2 hours to record podcast episodes. So that structure is also helpful, but I think the underlying principle is if you can just find a block of time. I like the 2 to 3 hour block of time because I feel like you can get a lot of stuff done and dive deep into it. And then you just kind of go about your day. So here's kind of the action tip that I would recommend, especially even before you start thinking through your podcast. Look at your schedule and block out a 2 to 3 hour block where you can actually work on your podcast. Then you can also, the other cool thing is once you record those episodes, all of these podcast hosts, you don't have to be physically there in order to release the episode. So, i.e., you can actually schedule out episodes. So, we use Captivate for our podcast hosts. If you go through sellingthecouch.com/Captivate, that's an affiliate link, but there's a little discount code there as well. But this just makes it way easier because then, at this point, we have an editor as well, and that'll be 0.5. But you can literally then just schedule these episodes out, and it saves a ton of time. And and then you just kind of go about your day. Now, I have a little bonus tip for you related to this. It's more of a next level tip, but you can actually stack this by creating a podcast on your live schedule. So with the STC podcast, we're currently recording live episodes 6 months of the year. The other 6 months, I'm running replay episodes of old episodes because, we now have like 375 plus episodes. Now, when I first started, I didn't do this, but I think as I've become a dad and as just other life kind of things, this schedule seems to really fit. It's basically designed around our daughter's school schedule and at a pace that feels sustainable for me. So again, this will really depend on you and your pace. But what I have found is 2 months of doing live episodes and then 1 month break where we release replay episodes, and then 2 months, 1 month break. The summers and then November and December are off. I found just that sort of pace seems to be really conducive to doing a podcast, particularly as a parent. Now, what I do is I basically get ahead on my off months. So I'm essentially always like 4 to 6 episodes ahead. This lets me get into really good stretches where I don't have to record, or I can just take the time to think really deep about the types of episodes I want to release, the guests that I want to have on, all of that kind of stuff. The alternative is, you feel this pressure to release an episode. Oh my gosh, I got to get an episode out in 2 days. Let me record something. Or, oh man, let me just reach out to a random guest because I just need content. So if you can really structure it in a way that is conducive to your life schedule, and also realize you can change that over time as things change, then I think it's a good stack as well. Point 2 is repurpose your existing content. So why is this important? You probably already have tons of valuable content through therapy sessions, or if you're in supervision, or just in the course of maybe you've written blog posts, all of that kind of stuff. Now, of course, you want to be mindful to protect client privacy. You don't want to ever disclose anything. I know that all of us know this, but one thing you can start to do in each week, especially if you have a therapy practice, is just take 15 minutes and jot down any common themes that seem to be coming across sessions. So the benefit of this is people are coming to you for therapy to address a particular pain point, and you're now identifying these themes, and you can create podcast episodes around those common themes. So common client questions, challenges that you're encountering, any of that kind of stuff can be wonderful fodder for podcast sessions. Kind of a nuance of this is think about the advice that you give to clients on a regular basis. Chances are it's kind of the wisdom many people want to hear, and you can turn those particular episodes into podcast sessions. Now, here's kind of a little actionable tip to go along the way. One thing I found really helpful is, in the early days of STC, I would sit in front of the computer and put on my, get my mic ready, all of that stuff, and be ready to record a podcast session. And then I would be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have any content. And what I found instead is if you can capture ideas throughout the course of your day, i.e. when you're not in front of the podcasting mic, that just makes it a lot easier. So you can create, if you're love good old fashioned notebooks, you can just have a notebook, or you can have a notes app or something, a note-taking app on your phone, just to jot down recurring topics from sessions. And I do something which is a little bit interesting, but I found it really helpful, which is I created a free Slack account and I have a private Slack channel for just myself. And I have different sub channels within the main channel. And one of them is podcast ideas. And so as I may, for example, if I'm on a hike or something and I'm listening to a book, or I'm on a conversation with a friend and we get into something and I'm like, oh, this is really interesting, I'll just go into my Slack sub-channel and just make a quick note to myself. The magic of Slack also is that you can write a written note, or if there's like you see a quote or something that inspires you, you can take a picture of it, or you can just do an audio recording. Like, I came across this quote and I wanted to put it here because I think this could be a good idea for a podcast episode or related to blank, 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 right? So the main thing to just take away from this part of it is always think about ways that you can capture the new insights that you're learning and capture it on a day-to-day or even hour-to-hour basis. The third point I wanted to share with you is podcasting as a client attraction tool. So I feel like the vast majority of us, right, we are creating podcasts to grow our businesses and also to enter into thought leadership. So maybe we want to do more speaking at conferences or write a book or launch an online course or create a membership site, whatever it is. And that's the way that I think about podcasting. I definitely, with the STC podcast, one of my big goals is just to be helpful and provide value. But absolutely, I'm thinking about the podcast in terms of what is a larger marketing engine for STC. So one thing I've realized is starting a podcast and it can actually reduce your marketing workload, and it can even attract organic clients, like clients organically, or customers. Your episodes basically serve as free content that highlights your expertise. There's also something really powerful about our voices. There was a recent ACAST media study that studied sort of online influencers or online thought leaders across a bunch of different platforms, and they found that audio podcasters were the most trusted media personalities. And even just like a practical example, if you've been listening to the STC podcast for a while, you and I likely have never met, but I imagine you feel some sense of trust and connection to me. I think there's just something unique and interesting about the medium. And then I think there's also something unique when in the way that this medium is able to capture our voices. And in case you're curious, YouTubers were the second most trusted personality, which is part of the reason why we also started doing videos of these episodes. If you haven't followed us there, definitely check it out over on YouTube. You can just search for my name or search for Selling the Couch and it'll definitely pop up. Would love for you to subscribe there as well. And so just two things to remember with podcasts. So they're evergreen, meaning that people find our podcasts hours, days, weeks, months, or even years later after it's published. The second thing to realize with podcasts is that they have binge potential. So if you're like me, you've listened, when you find a new podcast, you're not listening to just one episode. You've likely downloaded multiple episodes. I know like some of my most favorite business podcasts, once I hear an episode for the first time, I will literally go through the playlist and then download the individual episodes on topics that are particularly interesting to me. But at a practical level, we know that from a marketing perspective, the more time someone spends with us, the more connected generally they feel to us. And so when you combine the fact that there's already a high level of trust with this medium of podcasting, combined with this binge potential, I think there's some real opportunities to really market your business and grow your business to podcasting. Now, I wanted to just share an example. So we recently wrapped up our launch of STC Elite, which is our mastermind for therapists who are creating their first online course. So this is just for therapists. We gather together and we work through live teaching to take your course from an idea to all the way to your beta group. We just had We have 11 colleagues that are in our current cohort. And, with all of these colleagues that join, I do one-on-one calls just because I don't know, for me, it's like, everything, especially with our mastermind, is not just like trying to get a whole bunch of numbers. It's about getting the right type of person. And I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of old fashioned. I like the human connection. I don't want, hundreds of people in this mastermind and I never actually get to know them as people. And because we do these one-on-one calls, I'm able to just have conversations with colleagues. And what's really interesting is 10 of the 11 mentioned that they first learned about me through like a colleague, or they like searched on Apple Podcasts and they came upon the podcast. And then they listened to the podcast, they felt the sense of trust and connection with me, and then they joined our free email newsletter, which again, if you haven't joined there, it's over at sellingthecouch.com/newsletter. We send it out every Sunday night. It's now over all our list is over 8,000, but the STC newsletter is now at 4,700, something around there, colleagues. And so, but they loved what was shared on the newsletter, and then they decided to join the mastermind when it became live because of the trust and connection they felt. It's not a, overly complicated marketing funnel. Like, I don't have a background in business, but I do really feel like this medium of podcasting, there's something that's very relational about it, and it was just so interesting to get also like data validation. And this has happened. This stat, this 10 of 11, there's a very consistent pattern when I've talked to colleagues in the past about this. So the actionable tip for you is create episodes around questions that clients are asking related to your niches and specialties. At the end of each episode, include a call to action. So inviting listeners to reach out for a consultation if they resonate with your message. And if you're using the podcast to grow your therapy practice, of course, just mention the states that you're licensed in. And then that can also kind of help make sure that you're attracting the right type of ideal client. Point 4 is keep episodes short and impactful. So why is this important? Your podcast doesn't need to be an hour-long endeavor. I don't know about you, but like Joe Rogan's podcast, for example, are like 3 to 4 hours long. And that format works really well, but I don't have that much bandwidth, and honestly, I don't think I'm that interesting to talk for 3 to 4 hours. And in fact, what I found is that shorter episodes, so 15 to 25 minutes, can be both impactful and easier for you and the listener to digest. So an example of this, therapists often worry about filling like an hour of content, but you don't need to. Some of the best podcasts are short. They're bite-sized pieces of wisdom that people can listen to between like a lunch break or on their commute to work. And the other cool part is when you have a 15 to 20 minute episode, and then we talked earlier about batching, let's say that you batch for like 3 hours, you can literally create anywhere from like, I don't know, like on the low end, let's say 6 or 8 episodes all the way to 10 or 12 episodes just in that time. Essentially, you can create 3 to 4 episodes an hour. So the actionable tip for this one is set a 20-minute timer and cover one question that your ideal client or niche is struggling with. The format that I like to use, and you probably notice this even with STC podcasts, I always start with a question. I usually share like kind of a personal relevant story. Again, like as a therapist, again, respecting confidentiality. In fact, I do a lot of like relating to my life and stuff that I've had to navigate. And then I simply share 3 insights and then a call to action to work with you if the intent is to fill your therapy practice. Or the other thing you could also do is invite them to join your email list. I'm a big believer in building an email list. Disproportionately, we've had a much higher ROI and this is just like business revenue. Literally 92 to 93% of anything people have ever bought from us have come through our email list. And so that's something also to think about. Point number 5 is outsource editing to free up time. So editing a podcast, that whole process is traditionally the most time consuming thing. Now, there are AI powered software now like Descript, and that makes things way easier, but you don't have to be the person doing the editing, basically. Especially if you have a busy practice, you likely have discretionary income. And just what my recommendation is, hire an editor at the onset, or if you have like an executive assistant or something like that, have them get trained in Descript and let them handle that sort of editing and uploading of the episodes. That way you are just focusing on the outlining the episodes and then actually creating the content like I'm doing right now. So the other benefit of outsourcing is you can then just focus and be in your zone of genius, and you don't get bogged down with the technical side, because I think the technical side is also the side that I notice that a lot of therapists get overwhelmed with. So for example, imagine recording episodes and then handing them off to a professional who edits it. This is literally what I do. So I'm recording this episode right now, and then once this is done, we have a file, and I literally Dropbox it to my podcast editor, who edits the audio and uploads it through Captivate and schedules it out. And then with the video, we have a video editing team through Floxy, and I literally upload the video. I tell them I have a template that I use. It literally takes 10 minutes, and we're able, I let my editor go to work, and then they're able to just create a great episode for us. And again, if you're like, hey, I don't know that I have the bandwidth to go hire an editor, I think you'll be surprised by how reasonably priced it is, especially like, $50 to $70 an episode is like totally like reasonable, right? And think about it, like even on the high end, $240 a month to outsource editing is like such a game changer. There's a bunch of different places you can find it. Upwork is one place you can look at, or just do a quick Google search of top podcast editing services, and there's just a number of them out there. Many of them afford really like affordable packages. The other sort of little secret tip is reach out to local universities and community colleges, particularly that have like audio or music programs. And there may be students there that are looking for internships or, paying work. Definitely, that's another option you can consider as well. So just to recap, the 5 points: batch record, repurpose your existing content, use your podcast as a marketing and self-care tool, keep your episodes short and sweet, and outsource out the editing. I think these strategies will help you create a podcast without feeling overwhelmed. Now, if you've been thinking about starting a podcast, but you feel like you don't have the time, I really hope that today's session's been helpful. Truth be told, I was terrified to start this podcast, but now looking back, this has been singularly the best career decision that I've made. It's allowed me to build out a really nice network. It's allowed me to serve our field. It's allowed me to create content at scale and distribute it at scale. And it's just been like personally gratifying. I am naturally an introvert. I'm an HSP. I'm an INFJ in my Myers-Briggs. And just the thought of doing public speaking and doing all this stuff 9 years ago, I would have cringed at this thought of doing any of this stuff. But when you release this many episodes, it's really interesting and kind of weird and kind of strange how it changes you from the inside. And it just makes you so much more courageous. We have a free podcasting workshop called Using Podcasting to Grow Your Business. This is basically the subtitle is Lessons Learned from 9 Years of Podcasting, a top 0.5 global podcast, and a 6-figure business designed around my family. It's an on-demand workshop, so you can watch it at a time and a date that works for you. It's absolutely free, and you can watch it multiple times if you need. A lot of folks and a lot of colleagues do that. That's over at sellingthecouch.com/podcasting workshop. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and have a great rest of your day. And if you're starting podcasts, your podcasting journey, I'm just so excited for you, and I can't wait to cheer you on. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.